So that's just one analogy of, you know, decision making and how important that is, and how important wisdom is and knowledge. Because even as far as masculinity goes, without a spiritual foundation, masculinity just says, "Hey, look, I'm stronger than you. You know, I'm Congo. You want to fight?"
Yeah.
See, masculinity has to be defined. And I like to look at it from this standpoint. When they used to say, call a man a gentleman, you know, the real definition of a gentleman is? A gentleman is a man that is very powerful and strong in all his ways, wise, strong, good looking, buffed. But he doesn't have to prove that to anybody. He can keep all that contained undercover. That's what a gentleman is. Somebody that can knock your head off just like any other man, but I don't have to prove that to anybody. You know, I can still be kind and gentle. That's what they call a gentleman. A gentleman is somebody who possesses some real power and knows the destruction that he can bring about with his power, yet he has the wisdom to be able to keep that power under control. In other words, because if I'm out in public and I'm with my wife and another man seems to be wanting to challenge me, I have the power not to be drawn into a serious altercation, realizing the damage that's going to be done. Because if we get to throwing hands or if somebody wants to use a weapon, look at the damage that's going to be done. There's going to be collateral damage. His home is going to be wrecked and my home is going to be wrecked because one of us going to get assault charges. And if we get to tussling out there in the street on some concrete, and because of my masculinity and all my testosterone without wisdom to go with it, then because I'm not going to be disrespectful in front of my wife, okay, I'm going to take the challenge, what most men would do. And then we're going to get to tussling and throwing hands. Okay, one of us is going down, right? And what if I get the upper hand and I throw this man to the ground and hit his head on the concrete sidewalk and it cracks like an egg. And then there he go, he's dead. Guess what happens then? Because of my masculinity, testosterone, and no foundation, no spiritual moral, I've killed this man. So what I've done in a sense, I've taken him away from his household, from his wife, from his sons and daughters. All that mourning has to go on there because they're going to have to bury him and make arrangements. All because I didn't have wisdom to use. And because I got drawn in and let my masculinity get the best of me. But at the same time, it don't stop there because not only is he's taken from his family, then of course, then I'm going to have to go to jail. So I'm taken from my family also. So there's two men gone. Now, tie that all the way back to the 1900s or whatever. The difference in the culture, because when you get away from the basic foundational principles of godly wisdom and using wisdom, the walls have fallen down. So guess what? The gates are wide open. So I can say what I want. I can do what I want. But as a result of it, for every action, there's a reaction. So not only are the two men, one man is dead, one man is going to jail, taken from his family, then that's putting the family in poverty because the bread earner, the masculine man, has been taken out of the door. There's nobody to guard the gate no more. There's no protector for the wife. There's no strength and guidance for the children. The male figure is gone away from the young ones in the house, so he has and she has nobody else to look to. So we can see clearly the biblical foundation that God has laid out is the best principle to follow. And that has stood throughout the generations of time. You look at even a household, as we said back in the 1900s, since the earliest of civilization, when a masculine man was in his position, even unto this day, you show me a home where there's a masculine man, being a masculine man, like a gentleman, heading the household. I'll show you a household that's sailing like a sail ship on water. But you show me a masculine man without a biblical foundation, without wisdom. I'll show you a man that's in there flexing his muscle, got his kids scared of him, he beating the wife down. See, those are always used in different places. Not to say it's just only on the man. That's why it's a delicate balance. If you get back from a biblical perspective, and that's where wisdom comes in. God created male and female with identities for both. And so, but if society gets away from that, then boom, they lose all their identity. So that's the struggle that you see people walk around. They can't figure out who they are, how to live, what to be. They can't figure out what the roles are in the home and whatnot. But the Bible clearly defines that from the very beginning, from the beginning of the book of Genesis. So we can see without that, you know, we separate church from state. But again, you know, you can keep it separated verbally, but you can't really separate it because this is our very core, and that's the very foundation of who we were created to be. That's just who we are. And there's only two sexes, unlike the world's so confused about. There's only a male and a female. There's only a man and a woman. There's only two genitalia when you watch a newborn baby born. I mean, that's just simple as it gets there. So all that All that from the very beginning, though, that ties into our roles as we grow up and move out into society and become men and women. We're not born men and women, but we're born male and female. So we're created and groomed into men and women. So if men and women having babies, they don't have the foundation. People are not getting the proper grooming now. So then guess what? Identity crisis. It all starts with that little bitty baby that you rocking in the arms. See? And we can't help the parents that we're born to, but I thank God for the ones that I had. And that's why it's a blessing to have good parents. Unfortunately, everybody, going back to what we said before, choices. And so if you're born to a man that don't know anything about masculinity, born to a woman don't know nothing about femininity, and that's the argument that we have. Just a sidebar, as far as talking about masculinity, that's the problem we have with cross sexes and both of the same gender trying to raise children. How can two men raise a daughter? You would think that's common sense.
You would think so.
Two men have never had a menstrual cycle. Two men have never lived in a woman's body with the way a woman makeup is, with her emotions and her feelings. So how are two men going to raise a child with the proper balance? Just like on the other hand, how two women going to raise a man? Two women, they've never stood over the toilet with a penis and, have to handle things like a male child. They don't know. They don't know nothing about masculinity. They don't know how a man feels or thinks because they're not a man.
Yeah.
They look.
So that kind of alludes to, and you brought a good point, because we think of the different sexes and then you think of, the roles. And I know you mentioned the Bible defines that, because right now, my idea of a role of a man and role of a woman might be different from maybe yours, and even maybe a little bit similar or different from the Bible's. But I think as a man, you should aim, if you can, to be that sole provider. If you can, I know times have changed, and a lot of men can't do that. Yep. But I look at it more so if a man's a sole provider for the most part, and then the woman's managing the home and can contribute as necessary, I think that's the best case scenario. Because, and again, too, you got to think about it. The woman was designed to be a helpmeet. Now, how I need a woman to support me in my situation, what I have going on, is completely different. Exactly. Oh, so maybe as a man, you may need that extra financial stability due to your situation. But in my situation, I might say, I don't really need the financial stability. I need you to be at home, or I need you to tend to the kids more, or help me on this business over here. So obviously it ranges, but you mentioned in the Bible, and even in Genesis, it stated that there are clearly identified roles. Now, to my knowledge, it's only Jesus told Adam to tend to the garden, and then Eve was to help him. But it seems like that role is pretty vague, if not very distinct.
Matter of fact, it's funny you should say that. Look, I have my Bible right here. And look, I got to turn right to that scripture. Just let you read one verse.
Okay.
And that is Genesis, the very beginning, first chapter, verse 26. And God said, let us make man in our image. Of course, talking about the Godhead, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Made in God's image with three-part persons. I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. I'm flesh, I'm spirit, and I have a soul. I'm a living soul. So we can see how true and simple that is. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. What is God like? That's the perfect picture of masculinity. He created everything. He oversees everything. Look, he takes care of everything. Notice that? He created everything. He oversees everything, and he takes care of everything. See, what people don't realize, God is always engaged in man's affairs. Now, but he doesn't dominate. We still have free will, and we still have abilities to create. It says, not only that, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon earth. What a gift. God created creation. We're the crown of his creation. He handed us responsibility over everything that he's created. Now, he goes on in the next verse. He says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female, three-part persons.